we go.
Okay, well, welcome to this presentation, No Midway, No Problem. So a little bit about me. I'm a high school teacher. It says that I'm a farmer, but frankly, it's a hobby farm. I breed high-end English Orpingtons, and I have horses, and my husband runs a small plant nursery. I'm an equine therapist, which just means I'm qualified to use horses as therapy in a non-riding context. And I'm also a community volunteer. I do a lot in my community because I think it's really important to kind of build the community that I live in. In addition to the fair, I'm also an organizer of the Blue Skies Music Festival, which you probably have never heard of before. It's entering its 50th year. And a lot of the new things I've introduced to the fair, like they're not some wild and new idea I've had that's really exciting. I just took it right from Blue Skies and applied it in more of an agricultural context, and it's worked really well. I haven't been here my whole life. We kind of fleshed this out earlier this year. I really didn't grow up in Parham for very long. I moved to Parham when I was a kid, when I was 8. And then when my parents divorced when I was 14, I left. And that was it. I really didn't spend that long. But Parham was always my home. That's kind of where when someone said, "Oh, where are you from?" I always said Parham, no matter where I was. And, you know, I grew up close to Kingston and Sydenham, and then I moved to Toronto after university and worked there for a decade. But I was always going to move home and buy a farm. And I did. That's just what I did. So I lied to my husband, said, "Oh yes, I know that farm. It's very wonderful. If you like it, we'll buy it." And that was a lie. I'd never been on the farm before in my life, beyond the barnyard. But I really wanted to live in Parham. So that's what happened. And as soon as I came back, I walked into the fair board meeting, and it was like I had just stepped out for a cigarette or something. No one even blinked. It was just like I had always been there again. So that's kind of my story. I work with a lot of people in my community and my students now as well on the fair, and it's really cool. It's a really cool thing we have happening. And that is more than enough about me. So this is kind of a snapshot of the Parham Fair. I tried to find a picture that kind of represented what our fair was all about. And this I settled on because it really highlights the fact that we are not a big fair. If you see our outbuildings, they're not pretty. That's some nice asphalt brick you see on our, what we call the palace over there. It's not a big space. And that's just the way we've kind of always had it. Parham itself, when I was a kid, was a lot bigger. And since I was a kid, we've lost our grocery store, we've lost our gas station, we've lost our pizzeria, one of our general stores, one of our churches has burned down, and we lost our school. So the school I went to when I was a kid is no longer. That's huge. And the only thing Parham has left now is one general store, the post office, and the Parham Fair. And that's why, one of the reasons why it's really important to me that we keep it up. And it's really important to everyone, I think, on our board. We really see a purpose in keeping this little town alive. So here's what we're looking at today. It's not just about a Midway, it's deeper than that. So I'll give you a little brief history of the fair, how we changed our approach and our attitude, our brand. We're going to talk about that, what that is, and then how finally we just let go of Midway completely and moved forward. All right, so 130 years. I think we're at 131 this year. I'm sure many of you are from a smaller fair. That's probably why this presentation is attractive to you. You probably have also had issues with Midways not showing up, violating contracts, not bringing the rides they said they were going to, being uncomfortable with the safety of those rides. We've had all of those issues. And then also common experiences where we were. This is largely a snapshot of where we were in 2019. So I joined the fair in 2016, 2017, and I was there for 2 years and I quit. I left because I just couldn't handle kind of what was going on. I'm kind of a doer and a trier, and that wasn't happening. So the fair board was about to collapse, and some calls went around, and I was one of the people who got a call and said, we're not going to go down like this. We can't do that. And then I think 6 or 7 of us showed up at the meeting, and we just kind of took it. And there was a lot of relief, I think, from the board members that were leaving, because they didn't want the fair to end either. They just didn't see a way out. We didn't have any money. We have always, probably for the last 25 years, run on a budget of about $20,000 to $25,000. We spent it all, we made it all. We spent it all, we made it all. There was no wiggle room, and there wasn't a lot of money to begin with. We're stuck in a rut. Things didn't change, and there was a lot of hesitancy is one word, but just absolute no to trying new things that might be a little bit risky. One of the sticking points, and the reason why I left, was we weren't going to have a beer tent. We had never had a beer tent, never, ever. And I felt really strongly that that was something that our fair needed to get a different demographic, age demographic of folks into the fair and more people through the gates in general. And I was told, absolutely not, no. And so I said, okay, bye. And then I did. I left. And so we had a whole new board, and everyone was really excited in 2020. We were so excited. We had all of these ideas. And then 2020 happened, and we decided to go ahead anyway, and we did a virtual fair, which was a really great way to kind of move a lot of our stuff online. So when the new kind of board all turned over, I wasn't the president. I was the vice president. Our president was Richard Ben. He had been the president years before. Richard is one of those people that we all know a Richard, you know, someone who, if anyone kind of speaks ill of that person, you're just like, oh no, they're not okay, because no one speaks poorly of Richard like that. He's just one of those people that is just a fantastic neighbor. He's a fantastic friend, and he's been fantastic for the fair. And I think we're all really grateful to him for stepping up when he didn't have time. But he and I sat down and we kind of identified our problems. We were tired, and we weren't trying new things. And the source of those problems was largely that, you know, there were too few people doing too many things, and they had been doing those things for a long, long time. And that kind of had to change, but we didn't know how to do it. So we decided to have some guiding principles to kind of fix those issues that we were just going to run by. Whether in the moment we agreed with them or not, we decided we were going to follow them. We were going to try it. So here's what we came up with. We were going to listen to everyone's ideas. This is something I took from the Blue Skies Music Festival, which works on a consensus model. And if you think that that sounds impossible and crazy, you're correct. It is impossible and it is crazy, but it has worked for 50 years with a couple of hiccups. So we decided we were going to do that, because when you have volunteers, nobody wants to volunteer if they're not having fun. And nobody wants to volunteer if they feel like they're not being heard. So we decided that that was something that we could definitely do to make people feel valued in the Egg Society. Did that mean our meetings sometimes went on for hours? Yeah, it did. We decided, we started bringing baked goods and wine and just kind of, you know, committing to it. And we got a lot of cool cool things going because of that. Of course, you're always going to have things where you're like, oh, actually, we're not going to have camels at the fair. And I know that. We all knew that. But that person was really passionate about it. And so we were going to hear them out, because that's the least you can do, right? If someone's going to show up to volunteer for you. We also committed to trying new things, whether we were sure they were going to work or not. We decided that this was a make or break for us. We really had to do that. And you know, the pandemic was obviously terrible. It's one of the worst things that's happened to the world in a long time. For the Parham Agricultural Society, it was the best thing. It truly was. We had to try new things. We did a virtual fair when most fairs said, no, we're just going to take a year off. And then the next year, when things were still really iffy, we decided we were going to have a vendor fair, and that's all we were going to do, because traditionally our vendors had been like, maybe we had 4. It was just something we hadn't had a lot of time to commit to. So we spent that second year throwing ourselves into building our vendors. And now we have, I think the last time I checked with Nancy, 45 vendors for this fair. So that worked out new. That also meant we were going to try having a beer tent, which you'll hear about later. Spoiler alert, it was wildly successful and we had 0 problems. And above all, like if there's only a couple takeaways from this, have a good time. Like, what's the point? If you're not having fun, like, why? What? There's no point in doing it at all. I mean, I come to the convention every year, and I feel like one of the reasons why I love going to convention, and why maybe other people do too, is to get all of these cool ideas, but also to know that you can talk to other people and you're not alone. We all have the same frustrations. And I have seen that many people are very frustrated, and that makes people really disheartened, and it makes them really tired. And I'm not special. I was feeling that way too for a while. But as soon as we committed to having a good time, everything kind of changed. If things got a little heated, we would just be like, remember, we're having fun. And suddenly it wasn't as important anymore. And we would kind of steer it back and have a joke and move on. Because at the end of the day, nothing that our fairs do, any events, anything that happens at our meeting is worth people feeling crappy. It just isn't. Because the whole point is building our community. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little video, and that's just a video I put together of last year's fair. And if you could brainstorm 3 words to describe the fair that you see, and you can just put them in the chat, and then maybe Val or Vince, you could read them out at the end, some of the contributions. Okay.
I got a piece of land out in the countryside. Lay back and smell the sun, warm up the Georgia pine. Feels so good to be taking it easy. Why would I ever leave? 'Cause I know I got some good friends that live down the street. Got a good looking woman with her arms around me. We're in a small town where it feels like home. I got everything I need and nothing that I don't. Oh no, oh no. We got a fire go down by the riverside. Sip whiskey out the bar, living like we'll never die. Come on and stay a while. If you don't believe me, why look down the street, got a good-looking woman with her arms around me. We're in a small town where it feels like home. I got everything I need, and nothing that I don't. Everything I need, and nothing that I don't. Homegrown. It's the way that you care it from the things you think you want. It's the way that you care it from the things you think you waste you caring. It's the way that you care it from the things you think you want. I got everything I need, nothing that I don't. Everything I need, nothing that I don't. Everything I need, nothing that I don't. Oh, everything I need, and nothing that I don't.
Okay, so you may not have known this was an interactive presentation, but it is. So let's see. Oh, I can see this. This is awesome. Okay. Smiles, family, cooperation, community, thinking outside the box, happiness, youth, agricultural roots, participation, agricultural fun, smiles, animals, fun, friends, family, farming. This is awesome. This is great. So, oh, shoot, I'm going ahead. There we go. Here's what we came up with for the Parham Fair. We came up with wholesome. I wanted it to look like, first of all, we wanted it to kind of resemble the way we felt when we were a kid. But I wanted it to look like some kind of cheesy movie set of what people thought a good old country fair was like. Because we have a lot of folks that don't live in our community that came. Also, I wanted people to really feel our community, families, and because that's who comes to our fair, and affordable. So it was really important to me. We live in a pretty economically depressed area, you know, all things considered, and it was really important to me that a family of 4 needed to be able to come to the fair, get through the gates and have lunch and spend the day for $50, and we did it. So we may be kind of shifting our gate fees this year, but maybe not. So adults were 10, kids are 5, and you can eat a hot dog and a pop at the church fair booth for $5 a person, and everything else at the fair is free. So we don't charge for anything at our fair, including like this year, our pony rides. Normally she charges $5 a ride. We are just doing it so that one of our former presidents had this idea where we're getting people to sponsor an hour of pony rides. So I just phoned the pony lady and said, what's the max you can make in an hour? And she said $250. And I said, great, we'll pay you that. And that's what we're doing. So it's free for everybody. One thing I didn't mention in terms of problems, which you won't see in that video, people weren't coming to our fair anymore. Like a good fair was 500 people. And I always hear people say, oh, I love the Parham Fair. But the fact is they didn't love the Parham Fair because the Parham Fair they were talking about was the fair from like 1992. It wasn't a recent fair, and that was a real problem. We weren't making our money back. So when I say affordable, that also played into it because we wanted to make sure people came. So branding, branding's for everyone. It sounds like a scary thing. It sounds like, you know, something, you know, people do in Mad Men, but it's not. It's for everybody. It really benefits us, and none of us on our board have any background in marketing whatsoever. We just kind of had a good think and were honest and, you know, looked at the root of what people liked, what people cared about, what people wanted, and why people, if they were upset, why they were upset. So how does it relate to not having a Midway? Like, how do you brand your fair? So all branding is creating a distinct identity that sets you apart. That's just the basic definition. And the truth is, our identities are similar. So we have distinct identities as small country fairs. So if anything you see in here, you think fits your fair and you think, oh, I can't steal that from Parham, steal it. This is why we have different egg societies. We're all far enough apart that people can go to different fairs. So we're not taking from anybody else. So if you like our kind of, mantra or our kind of brand that we came up with, use it. All sorts of fairs around us have those. Just kind of a catchphrase that encapsulates everything that their fair is about. So what's the point of branding your fair and how does it relate to having a Midway? So you have to know why people come to your fair, and they don't come to your fair for a Midway. That's a joke. Who drives and pays money to pay even more money to go on a ride that came in on the back of a truck? No, that's not a thing. And yet we have people, I'm sure every year you have someone say to you, if you still have a Midway, they complain about how it's not good enough. Or if you have recently started not having a Midway, they get this line, okay? It's not a fair if you don't have a Midway, which I receive at various levels of goodwill, depending on who it is and when they say it. One gentleman leaned in the fair office at like 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, and it was already 30 degrees, and I had been there since 5 a.m. and he just leans in and pulls that line, and he got my teacher look, I'll tell you that much. But it really does make us think about, why are they saying that? What do they expect from a fair? So, a Midway doesn't give people rides. It gives people a unique experience they can't do all of the time. It gives people a way to make memories with their family or with their friends. And it's a summer thing. It's like the quintessential reminder of summer. So if you can take those three things and give them to your fairgoers, they're not going to miss the Midway at all, or maybe not as much. Maybe they'll still miss it, but they're not going to miss it as much. So we had to figure out how we're going to give them the experience and the feelings that a Midway gave them without having it. Because it didn't matter how often we said it, they just didn't believe us. And we all know Midways aren't a thing anymore for our little fairs. It's just never going to happen. So here's the hard truth. If you take nothing else away, this was like the big thing for the Parham Fair. And this was the thing that our previous board was doing. You have to plan a fair for the community you have now, not the one you had 50 years ago. You don't probably, if you're like our community, you don't have a lot of actual farmers around you. You have a lot of folks who live in the country, but don't farm. And that was a big realization. Once we realized that people were coming to our fair and seeing it as kind of this, like, first of all, it was a little cliquey because they didn't know anybody and there was no way to talk to them because the farmers huddled around their cows and talked to each other, and there was nothing to like engage everybody all together. And on top of that, the events we were offering weren't attractive to people that don't farm. And the reality is, people that live in the country or people that live in the city, they want to come to the country fair to feel like farmers for the day. So that means they'll sit down and watch the cattle show for 10, 15 minutes, and they'll learn something about, the depth of a chest and the heifer and all of those things. But at the end of the day, they don't actually care. They just want to have that experience, but they don't want to have it for 3 hours. You have to have something else happening so they don't arrive to the fair and all you have going on is the cattle show for 3 hours. And I don't mean to pick on the cattle show. I love watching the cattle show because it makes me realize I know a lot more about cows than I thought I did, which makes me feel very good about myself. So that's always fun. And sometimes they let me hand out ribbons, which is also very cool. But in general, you want to plan an event for the people that actually live in your community. So here's what we did. We got honest. We like had a day where we just said, here's what I think. And we didn't really worry if it was offending anyone. We didn't go out of our way to be rude to each other, of course, but you know, if there were things in the palace, I think someone said, you know, why do we have wheat? Nobody grows wheat. Why are we wasting printing on this? No one submits for it. No, we got really honest. What was important to our fair? And what are we hanging on to? What the Midway represented, we found for us, was our own childhood experiences, largely. There was a lot of, I wish the fair was like it was when I was a kid. Well, it's not. We're older. Some of us are old. And it's not going to be that again. You know, time marches on. And we have to replace that with something and give the same feeling. So here's our brand. Community through agriculture. Simple, clean, and it drives literally everything we do. We run it through this little statement. Is it community? Building community? Is it agriculture? Sometimes we're generous with the term agriculture. Sometimes it is more community, but overall, everything fits into this. And like I said, if you think this would work for your fair, take it. We did not patent it. So what did we do? We decided we had to let go of this Midway and move on. We were transparent. I put it all over our Facebook why we weren't having a Midway. Excuse me. And we were really positive in the same vein about all the cool things we were doing. Getting young folks involved. So admittedly, this is something that is a lot easier for our agricultural society because just outside of our community in Sherbet Lake, we have a K-12 school and we have one feeder school of K-8. And in that K-12 school, most of our fair board works. So I teach there. Our volunteer coordinator teaches the 5th grade. Our student services secretary is in charge of our fundraising. Her husband is in charge of fixing up the grounds and that kind of thing. And our vice president is also the itinerant teacher in elementary. So we actually don't have a problem getting young folks involved because they're with us all the time. But if you can do the things that we did, then I don't see why it wouldn't work for you. So what I did was I went to the grade 7 and 8 classes in June with a little form, and I talked up the fair. I did like just a presentation of pictures. It was pretty short, and I talked a lot about how fun it was and something that you could spend time with your friends and cool thing to do in the summer. And then by the end of that, I said, oh, who wants to volunteer? And we had all these hands go up and they were all excited and they filled out their forms. And we also talked about why you should volunteer because students have to get their 40 hours of volunteer hours before they can graduate from high school. They can get those hours the summer after grade 8, if you didn't know that. But as an educator, I have a super big problem with this mandatory volunteer hours because as someone who spends more time volunteering than they do actually getting paid for their job, I don't think mandating volunteering is the way to go. They just seem to do this to me. I just don't think it makes sense. So I really didn't attack it from a volunteer hours perspective. I looked at it from a philosophical perspective and kind of what was intrinsically involved in getting involved in volunteering. And it worked really well. We also replaced the experience. So you'll see the other things we did. So I thought, okay, what are things that are unique that you can only do at the fair? Summer, creating memories with your family. And we just, if we could do it, we did it. And if it was low budget, even better. You don't have to spend a lot of money to do this stuff. We did, in full transparency, have some money. We were very fortunate to get a $20,000 grant, and that really helped us. And it has built our bank account to now, I think at our last meeting, it was at like $58,000, which is pretty huge in the span of less than 2 years. That was pretty great. But by and large, we didn't look at spending a lot of money. And that is what we did before. So we rented these great big jumpy castles, a rock climbing wall, and it didn't hit. And it cost so much money. And it was just unnecessary. So one of the things we did, one of the things we did, for example, and you'll see this later on, again, I stole this from Blue Skies. You saw in the video, our t-shirts are like white. I had a big tie-dye station. And so I just bought fabric dye. I think I spent $10 at the dollar store, and I already had a formula because we do this at Blue Skies, and I put them in. We all saved up detergent bottles, and you could buy your t-shirt or your tote bag and you could tie-dye it. It cost, I think, $20 all told. It was one of the most effective things we did. We did it small, it only lasted for about 2 hours before we ran out of dye, but it was so wildly popular that, yeah, this year I'm going to shell out $50 for dye and it's going to be great. But it fits all of those things. It's unique. It's something you do in the summer, and it's something you can do to create memories, because you can wear that t-shirt later and remember that. So to expand on this a little bit more, being transparent and positive, our social media was a big part of that. That video you watched, I released in January. I'd like to say I waited that long on purpose, but the fact is I got busy and just didn't do it. And it just turned out that releasing it in January was the right thing to do, because it reminded people of the fair when they were sitting in the dark and in the cold. And that was really nice. Anything you can do to represent your fair through any way you can. So this is really subtle. So my house, it has a yellow roof. I built it that way. It was on purpose. I caught a lot of crap for it while I was building it, and now it's a bit of a landmark. And frankly, I think it looks nice. But this is that small town thing. I could have just put my address, but I put the house with the yellow roof, and I thought, well, maybe we'll get a couple people come that just really want to see what the inside of this nutto house looks like. And we did. Someone came solely because they wanted to see the inside of the house with the crazy roof. And now they're roped into doing work for us. So that's terrific. And then my mom fulfills this. She doesn't even know she's doing it, but she does. So any kind of little thing, what kind of cookies are you making? She meant that as like a dig at me, because that's how we communicate on social media. But really what it does is reinforce this kind of small town, wholesome community. Join us, be a part of meeting your neighbors kind of thing. And, people embrace that. So this was one of the loveliest comments we got. And it was just really appreciated. I think we should perhaps pay Pamela here a salary, but any time that we get comments like that, I advertise them. And then young folks, this is Tristan. He is one of those, he's probably going to be the president of the fair. That's Richard standing right behind him. Tristan is one of those people who's really embraced kind of what volunteering is. We don't even count his volunteer hours anymore. Honestly, we had a group of probably 6 or 7 13-year-olds and 14-year-olds, and we could not have run the fair without them. We were not prepared for how many people, how busy it was going to be. We just didn't know, and we couldn't have done it without them. And, you know, kids like Tristan, I just tell him what he's going to do, and he acts like, oh, I don't want to do that. But the fact is he really does. And it really makes him feel, I think, that he's a part of something and he's important to that organization. And that's true. You know, he is a part of something, and he is really important to our ag society. You know, he worked the entire weekend. We also, so I mentioned at the beginning, in 2020, we lost one of our churches. And so this was the old Anglican church booth. And I stole another idea from Blue Skies, because that's what I do. And we decided to make a kid-run ice cream booth. This just staffed by kids, because when you get kids volunteering as young as you can, it's a little bit of propaganda and it's a little bit of indoctrination. And I'm frankly okay with that, because what you get kids used to is the idea that obviously you volunteer at the fair. That's not extra, that's just what you do. It's a given, and we make it fun. And, you know, we had a volunteer as young as 3. If all they could do was take the popsicle and hand it to the person, that was fine. We also decided that, you know, we had a 13-year-old being like, you know, the pit boss in there, but we decided we weren't going to worry too much about money. My treasurer and I, we went to Costco and spent $250 on, you know, popsicles and stuff. And we thought, okay, well, if we lose money because they can't make change, well, it's $250. What's $250 if you are kind of training your next generation of volunteers? That's just the price of living. And we did make money. We made a lot of money, actually. And the kids were so excited. We turned kids away. So we're extending the hours next year. Because it was such a positive experience. They loved it. I can't recommend that you do that enough. So then we replaced experience. So like I said before, something is happening for all ages at all times, no exceptions. There has to be, and they have to be for different groups of people. So if the horse draw is running, kids don't want to watch the horse draw. That's when our pet show is running. And that's why we have these pictures next to each other. Well, this was happening, the horses, there's a young woman getting a prize for her, I think she had a cat. And there's lots of things going on. So this was the things that some of them knew, some of them not. We put our live music next to our beer tent because I was always horrified at how few people watched our live music. But now that we had a beer tent, it was a really good fit. And it worked out really well. We also are one of the only fairs that we run our own demolition derby. We are very fortunate to have 2 guys that they don't come to our meetings. Well, they do sometimes, but they do the whole thing themselves. And we're really grateful to Dave and to Mitch for doing that, to continue doing that, because it's a big savings for us. So in 2023, here's what we are bringing. We're bringing pony rides, which can be really difficult to find, but we're really lucky to find party ponies in Napanee. And we're bringing Instagram stations. So this is Jesselyn. She is someone who came to the fair this year for the first time ever. And she saw our poster, which you'll see in a minute. And her grandpa had grown up in Parham and he had passed away recently. And she thought, God, that poster kind of looks like it might be like when my grandpa grew up in Parham. So they came, and it was, she said she felt like it hadn't, like everything had changed, but nothing had changed. The feeling was still the same as when her grandpa was around and maybe when he was a kid. And then she came to our meeting and she's helping us now. But one of her things was you need to have Instagram stations. So we are fixing up their photo booths. Right? You don't have to call them Instagram stations, they're photo booths. And you can use those for your own media, or people can use them and they'll tag you in it. It's great. It's free advertising, basically. We're building lawn games. That's been a 5-year project. We got the plywood years ago. We just haven't had time to do it. It's been sitting in a board member's barn. So we're doing some cornhole and stuff like that this year. More food options. We had never had anything beyond our rec committee and the church booth, and it was very contentious. There was a lot of pushback. I got some really angry messages from community members. How dare I take away from the rec committee and the fair, or sorry, and the church making money. So we had to weather that. But the fact is, that didn't happen. They both ran out of food and had to make a midnight run to Costco. We did super well, and more food options just brought in more people. We had a Beaver Tails truck, and they pulled in, and the next night I was talking to them, and they said, we're gonna be honest with you, Haley, we thought this was gonna be a dud of a weekend. But we've made $75,000, not 75,000. Oh my gosh, that would be insane. $7,500. And, you know, like, don't underestimate small town people and their love of carbs, I guess, because it was like the hit. All of my students, my high school students, they don't care about the Midway anymore. They just want to know if the Beaver Tails truck is going to be there. So like, tick. So we're continuing that this year with another food option. We're looking into possible fireworks, because right now the Friday night is largely, the big thing is the horse draw. So we'd like more families with kids to come, and so we would put that on the Friday night to bring them out. So this was a big deal. So Parham had been in total prohibition since the beginning of time. There had never been alcohol sold in Parham. So there's Richard and I having our moment. I finally got what I wanted. We got a beer tent. It's craft beer. It had a capacity of like 50 or 60 people. We didn't have a single issue. It was a really cool spot, and our OPP officers that were there really complimented us on just finding the right formula for making it successful. And that's because we drove home this like wholesome all-time country family. We just kept punching that forward. And if you do that, you're not going to have a rowdiness problem, because those folks aren't going to come. We also only book local music. I get all of these emails like, oh, this, you know, Johnny Cash cover band. No, don't do it. I'm sure they're wonderful. But we book local people whose friends and family want to come see them play. So I have guaranteed people coming through the gate for that. And finally, our merchandise. I've already talked about food options. So that's our logo. I'm very fortunate. One of my closest friends is a graphic designer. So she created that for us 7 years ago. And we've been using it ever since. I think we are switching it up and putting a horse on it this year. But it's clean, it's simple. The lettering, again, you know, old-timey, wholesome, country fair. You know, it really drives it forward and kind of shows our branding really subtly. As a side note, people have asked me where we get our t-shirts, and this is our poster from last year. I order everything through Vistaprint. I tried to go local. It was way too expensive. And we are big believers in supporting local, but in this case, I wanted t-shirts that were really thin so people would wear them, because I find when a lot of these t-shirts, people like wear them to the barn or wear them as a sleep shirt, and that's not what you want. You want people to buy a shirt and wear it all the time, so it advertises your fair. So I got that really nice kind of thin cotton, and it cost a little bit more, but we paid $9 a unit for our t-shirts from Vistaprint, and we sold them for $15. I'm sure we could have sold them for more, but again, we wanted to keep things really affordable, and we were still making money. And the posters, we've never had a problem with the posters. They've been awesome, and they do a number of other things. I sound like a spokesperson for Vistaprint. They really should pay me a salary. But honestly, stuff comes within the week, and it's in really good quality, and I find their pricing really, really competitive. So if you're looking for a place to get that kind of stuff, that's my recommendation. So just to kind of sum up, you know, if you're kind of in a rut with your fair or you don't know where to go next, just be kind to yourself. Like if I've portrayed in any way that the Parham Fair has it all together, holy God, no, we absolutely do not. Here's a picture of Nancy last weekend. We opened up, we have these two kind of trailers, they're announcer booths, and this one hadn't been opened in, God, about 7 years, and it's sunken into the ground. And so we opened it up. We found these big bras. We were like, what is this for? And finally we remembered, if you were thinking of this, congratulations. If you thought, oh, it's from the Western Games Dolly Parton race, you'd be right. Back when we had a horse show, we used to do the Dolly Parton race, and that's what those are from. And so I put that on our Facebook and got people to guess. And again, that's nostalgia, that's memories. I'm not sure if we do a Dolly Parton race again, but I kind of want to give it a go. But we don't have it together. Like some of our facilities are still a mess, even though we work really hard at them. We got there, our ice cream booth, it's not secure. We have to figure that out. Someone stole our freezer. We didn't have a freezer. It was gone, and we didn't even paid for the one that we had. Our fair book isn't done. It's getting there, but it's not done because we all, you know, most of us work full time, and frankly, we just haven't been able to get it together yet. I still don't have a sound person for my music. So if you know a sound guy that's free on the weekend of the 18th and 19th, please email me. I am kind of desperate. We don't have it together, but I have every faith in the world that it will work out and it will come together. And as long as we just keep trying new things, listening to each other, and having a good time, I think it'll be okay. And I know that our community is really looking forward to the fair this year. So I'm pretty excited about it. So that is it. If you want to get in touch with me, it's parhamfair@gmail.com or through our Facebook page is fine as well. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm more than happy to answer.
Well, thank you very much, Haley. That was really, really interesting, and I really appreciate your enthusiasm and stuff with it. So, Liz, I'm not sure if you captured any of the comments in the chat that you want to highlight for Haley here to respond to, or?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions. I'll go back to the comments if we have time. What about encouraging older volunteers? Any ideas?
Yeah, there's a couple of things we did, and I think it would be really specific to your community. So I used my students who were interested in volunteering. I recruited their parents as well. I said, oh, that's great. Rosemary wants to volunteer. How about you? That's great. What a fantastic thing that your child wants to volunteer in our community. There's a little bit of guilt involved. And grandparents as well. I find that in our community, we have a lot of older volunteers, and we haven't needed to kind of have that push. But, you know, I would say don't put everything on social media, because a lot of older folks don't have that, and it can be really off-putting to have just everything all over your social media and your website. We learned that the hard way. Like last year, we tried to just have a printable fair book. No, people got mad. They were really upset that they couldn't pick up their fair book at Hope's. And things hadn't quite moved as online as we had thought. But the option was there. So we're going to continue, but you know, a healthy balance, I think, is really important.
Okay. Elaine had said the beer tent had done really well for their fair. Do you also have competitions for canning, baking, and quilting?
Yeah, so that's what we call our palace. My mom runs that right now, although she tells me every year that's her last year. She's not doing it anymore. I better find someone else. Yeah, so we have a really active palace competition with all of that stuff in it. And we did that even in our virtual fair. We really pared it down, of course, but it was done through photographs. So we focused on like decorated cupcakes and things like that. And then there was some feedback that we had cut it back too much last year. Some added in a bunch more stuff. And we send our the craft lists and stuff to teachers so they can do that in the last couple weeks of school when they just want to do anything but organize something else. So they find that quite helpful. And one thing a volunteer did, who's not with us anymore, she spent like $100 on craft supplies and had a day at our local CE building and the church, and local kids came and did all of their crafts for the fair, which was really cool. Because some of our kids live in pretty chaotic homes with not a lot of money, and they don't have access to that kind of stuff. And we wanted to make sure that it was accessible for everybody. And as far as our other competitions and stuff, our baking, our photography, it's all really well attended. We pay our judges really well. That's something I would recommend. Judges like coming to our fair, I think, because I don't think the pay scale has changed in like 20 years. So I was contemplating becoming a judge, and when I heard that, like, oh, it's like $100, no, thank you. Like, I'm too busy for this. So we pay our judges more, and it's really nice. We have a documentary that one of our former presidents made, and we have that screening the whole time in our palace too.
Okay, another question. Any suggestions for keeping meetings fun other than wine?
No. No, not really. Sorry, it's all we got. Yes, I do. So we used to meet at the church hall, and part of the reason that we did that was because we wanted to support the church. We gave them, $75 for the rental of the hall and all of that stuff. We don't do it anymore. We meet at my house or at someone else's house because it's much more informal. And I find that, like, when you have to get in your car and go somewhere, you don't necessarily want to sit on a folding chair around a folding table in like a dim room, and then you have to fold up all the chairs and the tables at the end. Like, no one wants to do that. It's not fun. So we meet at my house, and I make my husband clean the living room every month. So it's a good strategy for me too. But anything you can do to make it more informal, I would say would make it more fun. It helps that we all really like each other too. Like we all really get along and have kind of made a point of getting to know each other. I probably let people go about 15 minutes before we start the meeting, just chatting. And that's nice.
Okay. The rest are more comments just about Midway. Let's see, where are we here? There's lots of comments. So the number of teenagers come to the Midway because other fairs don't many fairs around us don't have one, and we usually do. Fairly large fair, and the Midway supplier is not very reliable on meeting the contract. And I think you mentioned that earlier on. Another fair, they have a touch-a-truck outside of the fair that went over really well. What else? Somebody had found that Vistaprint was more expensive than local, so it's good idea to check the pricing every year.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, so in terms of t-shirts, I could have gotten them way cheaper, but they weren't the t-shirt I wanted. You know, like I wanted a really thin, good quality, not with that clunky vinyl on it. I wanted a t-shirt that people would want to wear. And so through our local supplier, which I really tried to, it was $14 a unit. I couldn't do that. So, yeah. Sorry to
Okay.
interrupt you, Liz.
No, that's okay. Just other comments, great presentation. That it's really interesting, and thanks for sharing. And let's see what else we've got. There's another fair that doesn't have a Midway. They have a children's village with face painting, etc., and a stage for entertainment all day, food trucks and that sort of thing. So that's
Yeah,
great.
people love to eat. And so we're trying to strike a balance between our food vendors making lots of money and having enough food. We did not have enough food last year. The lineup for a poutine was like 45 minutes. I would say, and they did it. But I would say also one of the things is we don't charge our food vendors. I didn't know that was a thing actually until I was talking to Yvonne from Kingston. I was like, what do you mean you charge your food vendors? I didn't know that that was how you do this. It's not like I took a course on how to be the president of an egg society. The reason for that is that at the end of the day, it's a negligible amount of money. And I really like people to owe me favors. So if they have a warm feeling towards our fair, then that can work for us the next year. So maybe it's going to rain this year and no one's going to come to the fair, and Chubby Baby's food truck isn't going to make the massive amount of money they made last year. But I know they'll come back. I know they will, because they like us. And that goes a long way towards, you know, also from a practical perspective and from a philosophical perspective, like supporting our community. That's what the goal is. So we try to keep those costs as minimal. And when people say like, oh, I'll try and get the costs down, no, we're going to pay you what you deserve, because, you know, part of our mandate is supporting our community. So I don't want to nickel and dime folks too much. If you can afford it, if you are in the Parham Fair 2016-17 phase, then yeah, you're really going to have to figure that out. But we're not in that position anymore. Not that we're rolling in it. Okay, we're not the CNE, but that has always really helped.
Okay. And there was one question, one comment I wanted to go back to. How refreshing to hear that the goal is to have fun. So I think we should all keep that in mind. And
it's like something no one thinks about, right? Like, honestly, I go to convention, all these people look like they've been through a war. And we all have a board member who we just don't know what to do with. And there's legal action going on over here, and so has the police called on them over there. And, you know, someone stomped out of a meeting, and like that happened to us too. But it's really easy to forget the whole point is to have a good time. And like, my life is so busy that's why I left in the first place. The first time I left, I came home and I was like almost in tears because I was so frustrated. And my husband said, why are you doing this? Like, why? And I didn't know. Couldn't answer him. I wasn't doing anything good. No one liked me. I didn't like them. So I just removed myself from the situation. And then when we all came back together, it was a different tone. So yeah, like have a good time. No one wants to volunteer for things that aren't fun.
Okay. That's about it, Vince.
Well, thank you, Liz. There's one that I saw there, and I'm not sure you have a solution for it, Haley, but it comes from Elaine, and it says, our problem is our older volunteers are getting beyond being able to help.
Yeah. So our fair board, that is one of the things. So that's also a trend among our egg societies. I think there was a thing I saw at the convention this year that the average age of a board member is like 70 to 75. And I don't feel like that's a time of your life where you should be stressed about putting on a fair. That should be the time of your life where you're volunteering, doing smaller things because you enjoy it, not that it's resting on your shoulders. And so we're really lucky that most of our board is under 45. So we're really busy because we're all working full time, but that definitely was an issue. People are tired, and they've been doing it for a long time because they care about their community and they care about their fair. And yeah, I wish I had a better solution for that. Do you know what the best thing to do is to be super transparent with your community. Just say, listen, we can't do this anymore. It's time for people to step up, or we're not going to have a fair anymore. And I think in our community, there was no awareness that we were on the brink. We were on the brink of folding. I don't think, Vince, did you know that?
Yeah, I had heard rumblings, yes.
Yeah, but it wasn't widely known. But like the board was talking about where to disperse our fair funds, and like and then the year after, it was 9 p.m. before we had a president. We all just sat around the table and looked at each other. And I was new, and Richard said, "What about you, Haley?" And I said, "I've lived here for 6 months. No, like I can't do this role." And then a lady, the door opened, and she came in and she said, "I heard you need a president." And she never volunteered with the fair before. She just did a lot of volunteering. People were texting, people were calling, we were doing all these things. And because of her, our fair continued. And she's since passed away, and we owe her our fair because we needed that buffer year. So I would just say after that, we started being super transparent with our community and our media and saying, like, people can't ignore it. If you don't say it, they can pretend they don't know. And I'd just be super honest and say, like, this can't happen forever. And your communities will turn over too. Like there was about 6 years ago when people my age started to return back to the community. So that'll happen as well.
Well, thank you very much, Haley. What a breath of fresh air that you shared with us tonight. And I'm fairly certain that everyone here would want you on their board of directors, just with your enthusiasm, your drive, your passion, all of the above. Just before I do closing, I'm going to ask our president, Glenn, just for a couple of comments here this evening before we close off. A wonderful, wonderful presentation. Thank you, Haley.
Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. I agree with you 100%, Vince. What a presentation. Thanks, Haley. Great presentation, lots of enthusiasm, and I'm part of Almont Fair Board. Anytime you get tired of Parham, come on over. Ag societies do play an important part and a role in our mainly rural communities. And to everyone that's on the call tonight, by committing your time tonight, it shows you have an interest and a commitment to make sure that this important culture is around for many years to come. So thanks to everyone for joining the call tonight. And thanks also to Vince for his time and energy to make these webinars happen. Very useful information. If they're all like tonight, we're going to be bouncing and hopping across Ontario all summer. So thanks again to everybody, and thanks Haley and Vince, and drive safe on your way home.
Well, thank you, Glenn. I know the weather is nice out there, so I've had a number of requests saying they weren't able to make it, but they knew it was going to be recorded, which it will be, and it'll be posted within the next 24 hours, everyone. Just as a couple of reminders, I'm not going to show up a screen that I prepared here for you today, but next week we have information from our youth programming committee with the OAS, and that will be an exciting one too. There's a panel there that will be doing some presentations with what we're doing with engaging youth in our boards, which we heard from Haley tonight, and having those young people involved. And then the last Wednesday in May, we have the great Sean LaPalme, and probably Dual will be doing a presentation around insurance. Then June 17th, we are following up with a reminder around livestock traceability, and we're getting a lot of traction there. And I really want to thank the agricultural societies that are working hard on that. I know Monique is on there from their agricultural society. They shared with me that 17 members of their agricultural society have submitted those submissions in. And then on the 14th of June, we have volunteer orientation and training with a couple of individuals out of the volunteer Toronto organization to learn where to start when orientating and training volunteers, and how to keep them learning and ensure that volunteers can be safe and effective while performing their duties. So we've got a number of exciting things here to follow. We appreciate everyone's time, and a little over an hour here. What a great presentation. And thank you very much, Haley. Thank you everyone for joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Haley. That was great. Thank you.